Generating traffic and sales can be a challenge for online merchants. But selling on the Walmart Marketplace puts your products in front of millions of customers who shop on Walmart.com. And right now, sellers who join Walmart Marketplace can save up to 50% on referral and fulfillment fees for the first 90 days. So get started today. Head over to marketplace.walmart.com/savings. That's marketplace.walmart.com/savings.
Welcome to E-Commerce Conversations, a podcast by Practical E-Commerce.
What is going on, Internet? Eric Van Holt's back again with another E-Commerce Conversations. Hope all is going well on the other side of the Internet. On the other side of the screen from me is the founder of Sutro, Ravi. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
I'm excited to chat, and I appreciate you kind of making time for this podcast despite your travels and, maybe some, relocation issues.
Yeah, not a problem. Not a problem at all.
Why don't you give a quick little rundown for our listeners what Sutro is, what kind of things you guys are doing, and then we can kind of dig into your story.
Yeah, for sure. So Sutro is a robot that makes sure that your swimming pool and spa water is safe to swim in. We're basically a little floating laboratory that actually runs chemistry and tells you your pH, your free chlorine, your alkalinity, all on a super simple app. So you exactly know what chemicals to put in and when. And if you don't have those chemicals, we actually connect you with your local neighborhood pool store to go and pick them up, or those pool stores can deliver them to you. And so that's kind of simply what we do in a nutshell.
Is there automation to that as well? Like if you don't know where the pH balance should be, or does it require user input and things like that?
Yeah, the system is fully self-defined, so it knows all the complex chemistry and mathematics to get you to that right level. We also take into consideration, like the local weather in Austin or what your starting water chemistry is. Water is harder or softer in particular areas. All of that's actually put into a pretty sophisticated AI. And we tell you exactly what chemicals to put in, which is the human part about it. You have to actually put the chemicals in. We can't automatically do that for you. It is coming soon, though. But that's the kind of human element that we have as part of the product.
Back in the day, I was a lifeguard at my swimming pool. So I remember getting the little plastic container and dropping the little pellets in there and seeing what color they were, and then pouring bleach or whatever, chlorine, into a bucket of water and swirling around and dumping it in the water.
Yeah.
So you're essentially you're taking out that first part of the plastic part and just on the fly telling you where you need to be. And
exactly, yeah. So if you're that lifeguard, you would just look at your phone, and they would say, hey Eric, go ahead and put in 2 gallons of bleach, and that's what you'll need to do today. Yeah. So we're taking out that first angle.
Yeah. Do you need to leave it in at all times, or is it just something you drop in the water, take your reading, pull it back out?
It does float in the water, so we do recommend that you keep it inside your pool, mostly because the device and the algorithm starts to learn over time the way that your water chemistry changes. And so, yeah, we do recommend that you keep it inside there.
Okay. Now, you and I, we share a mutual friend, Antonio, who's been on the show as well, and he was kind of telling me a little bit of the backstory where this was actually not the first intent of the product, right? Didn't you have a different goal and vision for the business?
Yeah, very, very much so, actually. So I used to be an associate at a venture capital fund in India. This is kind of when what the industry calls impact investing was really blowing up. And so the fund's main motto was to fund companies who focused on technologies and products cater to people who make less than $2 a day. And obviously in India, poverty is a big concern. Food security is a big issue. And obviously water is as well. A lot of the deal flow that we had coming in was around water filtration, trying to solve drinking water, but nobody was really looking at water sensing. And so I took a little mini research project and figured out what's wrong in water sensing and why can't, we build technologies? Why are they so expensive? They were upwards of, $8,000 to $10,000 back in 2011. And it turned out there's very few companies that do water sensing. And so built our first water sensor actually in India, tried selling it to the Indian government. A note to all the startup founders out there, stupidest idea ever. Don't try to sell to a government. They just take really long time. And so we came back to California and dad and mom used to have a chain of pool and spa supply stores. So we flipped the model around. We said, look, let's go ahead and sell this sensor into more wealthier communities that can, fund the business. And then later down the line, we still have always had this vision and mission to solve drinking water, solve agriculture issues, solve food and beverage issues. Anywhere water is at the kind of crux of when it hits an application, we want Sutro to be there.
Yeah. So when did you launch? How many years ago was it?
Back in I think I incorporated the company back in 2014. And 2012, we were first messing around with prototypes.
Yeah. Yeah. So congrats on your decade of, endurance.
Thank you.
How have you been able to grow? You come from the VC world. Are you VC backed? Is that part of the strategy for growth?
So we were VC backed in the first 5 years, I would say. And then we got acquired actually by a large chemicals company in Canada. So as of 2017, we've since been acquired. And I now run the subsidiary, which was my company, basically.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of the story of how we grew.
Walk me through that process, the decision-making process of selling. Was that kind of a VC thing, or is that a you thing, or was it a resource thing?
I would say it was kind of the environment at the time. I think just given our current stage in the company, we kind of weighed the options of, raising more money, asking the investors for more capital, but it was just, a better option and better for the investors, better for our fiduciary duty to basically sell the company to this Canadian company.
Yeah. So how has it been, moving from an entrepreneur to an intrapreneur? Is the company pretty hands off and let you grow as desired, or?
Sure. I would say hands off and hands on. I think there are pros and cons on both sides with being venture backed versus, being as kind of an entrepreneur, as you said. The risk of always knowing that your bank account is finite, not that my bank account is infinite now, but knowing that you have to go out and continuously fundraise is kind of a daunting task, right? When you're scaling your team, you just have this weight on your shoulders of look, I have livelihoods in my hands, which I definitely do now, but being backed by a much larger company, the budget discussions are different, right? It's kind of more of hey, what is the market data that we should do this particular thing, and does it make sense? The beauty of also this particular acquirer also being in the pool and spa space makes it a lot easier, right? Because they've seen it, they've done it, they know what the market needs, and the acquisition for them was strategic, right? So they see the kind of real value and the real direction of the product, whereas a VC, putting my VC hat on, we invest in a bunch of stuff. I may not have pure core knowledge in the pool and spa space because I'm investing in, the alternate protein space and the, smart truck space and then the EV space, and I'm buying crypto on the side. It's I'm so diversified that I can't really focus on one particular thing, which I think is, the pro and the con of being VC backed as well as being acquired.
Yeah, I think, for your business, when I look at your business and kind of compare it to what we're building at Beard Brand, engineering is a very, it's very far away from the life that I live, and being able to bring in that kind of talent, which I would imagine the cost of engineers is significantly higher than, I don't know, operations managers or something that's just more general.
Yeah.
Are you an engineer by trade as well? Were you able to build the first prototype, or how did you bring in the talent to be able to develop this product?
Yeah, I actually am an engineer. So my background's in mechanical engineering with actually a minor in fluidics. And so we use microfluidics in our sensor technology. And I worked at NASA for the good part about a year after college. And then I got my MBA and did the VC stuff. So definitely, yeah, classically trained in engineering. And a lot of the technology that we actually use in the initial sensors from my mechanical engineering and fluidics days.
With that kind of background, I'm curious to hear, what is your take in working these various roles, working for a VC, working for one of the biggest, well, I don't know if they're the biggest, but a pretty big government agency, working for yourself, and then, of course, working within another private business? Yeah,
they're really cool things. And I think Naval Ravikant said this in his Navalmanac, the almanac of Naval Ravikant. As an engineer, I've just been trained to see things as processes. And so when it comes to deal flow or investing or finance or, working at NASA or building Sutro or digital marketing for all that matter, right? Shopify, how do you set up a store? Operations. I usually will, weirdly enough, just see everything in terms of flow diagrams, and I'll break it down into its kind of core composite parts to where I can basically outsource miniature pieces of this. And so that's kind of, yeah, I guess like that's the way I would answer that question is like as an engineer, I just see everything within the lens of process.
Yeah. Let's talk about like in terms of enjoyment, which I don't know. Do engineers enjoy? Does that compute with you guys or not?
Yeah, I guess does not compute. No, totally. I do enjoy. I mean, I myself am also a musician. I played in like jazz band growing up. I play the piano. I guess I can, as an engineer, I'm not really helping myself out here. Am I just naming off stuff?
Well, no,
but
I'm just saying like, like if you were to talk to another engineer who clearly has the talent and potential of you, like what direction would you direct them towards based on the lessons you've learned working for so many different agencies? Like, do you think there's kind of like a shortcut, like don't bother with working for the government agencies because it's all bureaucratic red tape. Don't bother doing the VC stuff because they, make you work 80 hours a week or whatever it is, I'd love to kind of hear your insights from working in so many different positions, where you would recommend people, chase that pathway or the risks they should look at within those different roles.
Yeah, I think I would just state for people to kind of design their own outcomes, right? I think like there are engineers that very much, a lot of my schoolmates in engineering still work at these large companies. They work at Raytheon, they work at Northrop Grumman. It just wasn't for me. I wasn't happy, right, in kind of working this like really, really small job as part of a much larger project. But a lot of my engineer friends that I know like love to see that they made that, one small piece on the, James Webb Telescope. And like now this thing's sitting out in the middle of space. There is, I think, value and happiness in all of that. And I think it really just comes down to like, what do you want your day-to-day to be, right? And if at the end of the day you come back and you're like, I'm not challenged, I'm not happy, working at this job or the other job, be it a VC, like I'm just so tired of working 80 hours a week, wasn't fun. But like, I honestly enjoyed being in India, right? I loved like working those really long hours and traveling around the country and seeing these entrepreneurs, whereas somebody who doesn't enjoy, maybe talking to people that much would find that very daunting. And so I would just kind of almost say to ask yourself that question, like, what do you feel like designing this outcome would look like? And does this job and does your process and does your day like fit that narrative of what actually makes you happy at the end of the day?
Yeah. Now, switching back to Sutro, like how have you guys been able to get traction in the marketplace? Is a lot of it through D2C or are you also building a distribution network and working through the channels?
Yeah, a little bit of both actually. So we launched right during the pandemic. And so everything we thought we were going to do with the, distribution side of things, the retail side of things was all shut down. And so we very, very quickly pivoted to, building much more of an online presence, which I would say the pandemic has been great for us, honestly, because we have the trend of people working from home, right? Everybody went to home. Because you're at home, a lot of more people built pools and spent more time in their backyards, right? Use those funds to have these staycations. And all that being like people that were stuck at home didn't know how to manage their water chemistry. And so our sales like really have been solid over the last 2 years through the B2C angle. Kind of an interesting way that we actually find people is we actually use MLS data sets, right? We like know where people with pools actually live, obviously, because you know a house that's been sold with a swimming pool. And so we kind of aggregate all that data and then, plug it in through Facebook and Google. And we have retargeting campaigns as you would from a typical e-commerce business. One of the interesting things that we're doing now, and this kind of lends to my history of, growing up in a pool store, is we're building a platform for pool stores to actually interface and communicate with their customers because 85% of pool owners actually do it themselves, right? You'd think that there's pool boys galore running around the US. Only 15% of the market actually have pool boys. The 85% of people either shop online or they go to a pool store to get their water tested. And so what we're building is kind of Sutro being this Fitbit for your pool, right? The smoke alarm that tells you if anything's really going wrong. And then you go to the doctor's office, your pool store, to get that kind of full 21-point checkup. And the Sutro platform allows for pool stores to see their customers' data and also for customers to go into pool stores and pick up the chemicals as well as get their water tested. But yeah, so that's kind of launching now into this year.
Oh, that's pretty cool. So you're building this link with all these stores. How do you, really, that seems like you've got to build out a pretty extensive network of salespeople to be able to develop those relationships with pool stores. And I would imagine a lot of them are just like, no. How do you get beyond that It's almost like that chicken or the egg, right? Kind of.
Yeah, so the interesting thing with Sutro is the middle ground here is that we recommend chemicals, right? Chemicals is the fuel, is the gasoline for the pool industry. And so working with chemical companies to make sure that we're right sizing their product for the end customer is actually how we get into pool stores. And so we're not necessarily building a program where we're going on the ground and knocking on every single pool store's door, but rather building the trainers program with chemical companies to help them use the Sutro technology to better tell their pool stores and their pool stores chemicals and their customers what to actually put into their pool. And so that's kind of our model today.
Why did you guys decide not to get into the chemical business as well? That seems like a really good recurring revenue.
It is. Number one is that it's pretty regulated, right? Shipping hazardous cargo across the US just takes a lot of money and a lot of time. Our Canadian company does it up in Canada. So actually our launch in Canada is going to be very different to the US, but they're obviously not in the US. And so, yeah, it's number one is actually regulation and just cost of shipping.
Yeah. Yeah. The hurdles of getting over that. You mentioned earlier on about like having a bigger mission than, serving rich people in their pools. No offense to rich people in their pools. Listen to this.
Yeah.
Like, what does that blueprint look like? When are the expectations for that? And, being acquired by another company, are they on board with that as well? Or do you have to spin off another company?
No, 100%. And I think that's the value of also being acquired by this Canadian company is they have 4 main verticals. Pool and spa is one. They have, food and beverage. They have agriculture and also wear, wash, and laundry as well. Plus actually an entire hospital segment that I forgot about. But if we get the pool vertical right, we can go ahead and actually scale that horizontally against their 4 verticals. And honestly, it might be a way to kind of turn the whole thing around for them to actually add on more verticals because, agriculture is a huge thing. We over fertilize crops on a daily basis and you get nitrification in the water, you get, saltwater intrusion in a lot of the California crops. If you could right size your fertilizer for your plants, that's where Sutro could live. If you, dose chemicals into these large buildings that get calcification on these cooling water towers, Sutro can live there, right? Food and beverage, we clean all of this equipment used to manufacture milk, manufacture cheese, manufacture meat. You need to measure if that water in that pipe is clean or not. And then you have issues like Flint, Michigan, right? All the way on the other side of the spectrum where literally people have lead in their drinking water, right? So that's kind of the applications and the places that we want to live after this. And honestly, our acquirers, Handymark, can probably help us actually get there.
Yeah. When I see all those opportunities, of course, as a D2C guy, is there, like for the Flint, Michigan residents, is it selling to the consumer, the end consumer, where they can, fill up a bathtub and drop it in and see where it is? Or how would that actual application work? Or is it some kind of like filter that taps into the water before it goes into the house, kind of like a different product?
Yeah, I think there's like really interesting ways to distribute into that particular segment. One could be through the B2C side, right? Like you just said, where we actually sell the product to a homeowner. They can, tie this thing onto their tap and they can measure it in a real-time basis. I think the real way to get reach and scale here is actually to sell to municipalities, right? If we work with city governments and cities, because they're actually required by the EPA to test their water, we could have Sutros against the distribution lines and they could basically get a map of all of their water chemistry against a particular city. Where I think that would probably be the most efficient way of going. But then again, we have to sell to cities, which was our first problem that we had.
I was about to quote you from earlier in this podcast.
Yeah. Yeah, I would caveat that with don't try to sell to a government when you're starting a startup. But I think if you have your shoes on and your pants on and you're kind of walking and you're acquired by a large corporation that already has contracts with these customers, turning that key becomes a lot more easier.
Yeah. Here in Austin, we've had a lot of water issues over the past 5 years. I think we've had 3 water boil notices just with stuff shutting down. And just like a couple of weeks ago, there was some kind of, it's funny because I have a team member who's in the water industry here in Austin, and there was an ability for them to automate a certain portion of their water filtration or whatever, but they didn't pay the money to invest in that, and it was a manual thing. And then it was a user error or a person error. They forgot to turn it on or turn it off or whatever. And so what you're doing just can be such a Like, I think about, like, we don't measure the time lost of everyone having to boil everything. And like, what was the productivity loss of the city of Austin for, essentially 5 days of boiling water, and the collective, loss to the city? No one's ever going to take responsibility or accountability for that. And
Yeah.
these are kind of like the efficiencies that we can get through automation, like Sutro and what you guys are doing. You've got a team of what, about 25 people?
Yeah, actually, at total count, I think we have like close to 50.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So
Yeah.
how has that been scaling up? Is that through you, or have you brought on like a COO, and how have you been able to build the team out?
Yeah, we've kind of been super lean with our hiring in the sense of we've contracted out a lot of our work actually very early on. And so the core team is still only like probably I would say 7 people or so. The remaining, 43 are actually contractors in China that do our manufacturing. We have a small team up in Quebec that actually is part of our acquire that does our chemistry and kind of all of our run through in the lab there. Our development team is actually in Kosovo in the Balkans, north of Greece. And we have a few developers in Mexico City as well. And so those are kind of all contracted agencies that do everything from manufacturing to chemical development to, app development and the pool store platform product. But yeah, we've been very lean after we got acquired. And I was kind of like, I can go and hire each of these positions, but in the essence of speed and just making sure that we get the product out in time, we'll have to pay a bit of a premium, but honestly, having contractors and their pattern recognition and the fact that they have so many, companies under their portfolio gives us the added advantage of them kind of, quote unquote, knowing more. So we're buying that external knowledge basically.
Yeah. I mean, with the teams being so distributed, what are some of the best practices for managing that and keeping communications clear and not being slowed down by time zone constraints or all the other challenges of working with global companies?
Yeah, I would say the first thing is having a project manager is key, right? You having like 1 or 2 people that really knows everything across the organization, kind of a COO, you can call them that, would be my first point. The second, especially for hardware, is we've split up the organization in terms of product, right? So all engineering will live under product, be that manufacturing, be that app development, be that web stuff. And then we've actually built a RevOps or revenue operations division, which has our customer support, our sales, and our marketing. And both of those are actually tied together through the project manager. And so the COO position really navigates between what feedback are we getting from the field to make sure that we're actually and accurately fixing that stuff on a weekly, daily basis. Yeah, those would kind of be like the 2 major things. And then the third is actually like making sure that Slack is a safe space, right? I think people, especially with engineers and just people in general, might be shy in commenting on Slack, right? Like we want to hold a culture to where people can talk about anything on Slack. And, obviously we have face-to-face communication. We use Google Meet, Zoom, but Slack is really that place that you can have kind of asynchronous communication once the agenda has been set. And so, yeah, that would kind of be like I forget what number I was on, the 3rd or 4th point.
Yeah. Have you had any troubles finding that right product manager?
Yeah, I actually used to do that job before, and then we've kind of, handed it back and forth to a few people. And then we actually hired funny story, my high school friend, who actually joined the company probably about 3 years ago as an intern because she got a data science certificate from San Francisco, ended up kind of interning, doing the data stuff, and was like, I would just love to live at the COO sort of PM position because I could like really bridge the gap between what's going on with the customer side of things and the actual product. And so I would say it was kind of a lucky bet, and she was in the company and we gave her that position and she's been absolutely amazing at it. But yeah, I would say it is a core position, and I would say finding for it would be pretty difficult if I was just to go out and like look for somebody.
Yeah. What do you think are the attributes about her that make her successful in that role, or what could people look for when they're looking for that kind of talent?
She's very detailed, first of all, right? Because when you're building out these product specifications, you just really have to make sure that the engineers can build against the product specification document. The second thing is she's able to be fluent both in terms of the customer side as well as the product side, right? So I think the fact that she has a background in HR and she used to work, at multiple large companies doing HR and payroll processing and sales as well. And then her getting that data science degree really allowed her to bridge that gap between both worlds, which if you're too deep on one side or the other, you may end up lending, bias to one team or the other. And so I think those 2 things combined are what I would say.
And then you also talked about something that I thought was pretty interesting is making Slack a safe space to kind of speak freely. What are things that you do to encourage people to open up and share their concerns or to call out when they believe something's going in the wrong direction?
Yeah, we have this, first of all, continuous kind of one-on-one loop that we have with the organization. So I obviously have one-on-ones with my kind of, direct reports, and then they do with theirs. But what I'll actually do is every 2 weeks is I'll do skip one-on-ones where I'll actually take, somebody that's like a junior developer, and I'll actually just talk to them and say, look, hey, what's going on? What are your career goals? And obviously what in the organization is working and not working. And that, for one, helps me kind of get the pulse at what's going on at the bottom. The second thing is also using, it's a stupid thing, but using emojis, right? When you leave a comment in Slack, people may have read it, but you should acknowledge that you've read it. And so putting a thumbs up, putting a happy face, putting a sad face, whatever that is, allows the poster of that comment to also see that. So we have this rule that look, if you've read it, if you're not going to answer it, you have to put a thumbs up or put, whatever your reaction is. And that's kind of allowed for people to realize that, there is things that are being read and things that are being accepted in this space versus just, a messaging board, basically.
Yeah, I feel like that sometimes where I'm just talking to the ether and it's just like, who's reading?
Yeah.
That's a pretty good rule. Do you call out people who are bad about not posting?
Yeah. I'll kind of, I won't do it in the public forum, but I'll share that message with that person. I'll be like, hey, this was messaged to you. You should at least put a thumbs up or, can you answer it? And many times they'll just answer me directly in the DM. And I'm like, look, I don't mean to be a prick, but go back on that comment and please answer it, right? Because so the other person that posted it can actually see that you've read it. But yeah, I will call people out.
Yeah, so you're the emoji accountability officer.
Yeah, exactly.
Add that to your title. Is the company kind of at the stage where it's running on its own, or is it still being subsidized by, the company that owns it, really? And is there a pathway, if you are currently being subsidized, is there a pathway to that profitability, and how do you see that transitioning?
Yeah, I think back to your question about kind of being acquired versus, and being VC funded, the number one thing that we built over the last 2 or 3 years is a path to profitability, right? Obviously, being a part of this company, they want to see us hit profitability metrics. They don't want to keep, funding it to the nth degree. And so what we hope actually is this year that we will break even against our own operational costs. And then, there is what we're labeling as debt, the initial debt that we took on from the company over the last 3 years that will actually, knock on wood, hopefully begin to pay back at the end of this year. So we will be in a healthier situation towards the end of this year.
Yeah. What are things that are keeping you awake at night?
I would say supply chains, just, we can now get products made in China. That's not the problem, but getting them over here is an issue, shipping containers, blockages at the port, and honestly, really ramping up our sales, right? I think we did a lot of brand building, which, had a CAC to LTV ratio that was higher than usual, but I want to start to bring that down so we can actually start building, profitability metrics within acquisition itself. And so I think that's where this pool store strategy really comes in, because if we can be at the point of intent where that pool store customer is coming in at the pool store, and Sutro really helps not only build that bond, but also get, technology deployed into people's pools, we're kind of in a much better place then too.
Yeah. Were you guys hit by the Facebook algorithm changes last year?
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
So it's nice to have that alternative, path to marketplace through the pool stores and being able to build, off Facebook essentially.
Yeah, I think we need to, start looking at how do we own our own channel of acquisition, right? I think Facebook was great, but with this, iOS, Apple, Facebook stuff, you start to realize if you depend on one particular channel for acquisition, you really haven't diversified. And so we are closely looking at that.
Yeah. Where can people support you, buy your products, reach out to you?
Yeah, you can go to mysutro.com. That's mysutro.com. And we're actively selling right now. So you can hit the buy button on the top right corner of the page and you'll have a Sutro in your house in about 3 to 5 business days.
Hell yeah. I just need a pull. I'll get my Sutro first.
Yeah.
All right, guys, this has been another e-commerce conversations. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Interesting business model, interesting product. Blows my mind what you've been able to do in such a short period of time. Congrats to what you've built so far. And thank you again for being on the show.
Awesome. Thank you for having me on the show.
Cheers. Keep on growing.